My name is Eyal, and I'm so honoured to be here with the remarkable Marla Tribich, MBE, Holocaust survivor, speaker, and wonderful human being. I say again because, Marla, I've met you twice before now, most recently on March of the Living. I've been invited here today to speak to you about your experience before, during, and after the Holocaust with the Holocaust Educational Trust, which is a UK charity that I know you've worked very closely with, and they work to educate people from all backgrounds on the Holocaust. So Marla, you and I are both Jewish, which is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about the Holocaust and educating people. And we're also going to touch on anti-Semitism as it exists today in the everyday world and on social media. So I think first off, I would just like to ask you what your life was like before the Holocaust and before everything that happened, you know, your family life, general day-to-day life.
Well, before the war, it was the usual life that everybody lived, not as sophisticated or enjoyable probably as today for children. They have much more than we ever had, but we were happy.
And did you grow up in a particularly Jewish area, and were all your friends Jewish or from Jewish families, or was it kind of a mixed community?
Oh, it was very mixed. It wasn't a Jewish area. I mean, it wasn't particularly not Jewish, that there were Jews living there, but not in great numbers.
Yes.
So we were mixing with other people.
Was there any anti-Semitism that you faced before the war in the community?
Well, there was. I was aware of it, and I knew about it. I saw it. They would call names, but I personally didn't really experience it very much. I mean, I wasn't ever pushed or kicked or called names.
But were you warned of it? Was there, like, other people had stories?
Yes, other people did have stories. But I think that there was a different attitude. We sort of learned to live with it.
Yes.
Because we knew they didn't, because they had a different religion, they had to hate us. I mean, it's a whole subject to describe why they do it, because they had no real reason. But it was mainly the religion and also the sort of perception of rich Jews. And really, we weren't rich. Yeah. We just had a moderately nice life.
Yeah, I think that is a reflection of the anti-Semitism that exists today, sadly, in a sense. Obviously, before the war, is the perception that people have of Jews as, you know, all being in this kind of rich society and controlling things, which, as we both know, isn't true.
Well, it isn't true. And what's more, it's been perpetuated into generation to generation. Yeah. And children who didn't even, well, particularly in England, some people up north never met a Jew. Yes. But they know what they think. Yeah. They've read it or they've been told it, and that's how it is. Really unfair.
And so, as the war started and the invasion started, what was that like for you? How did your life start to change? How did the community start to change? And what did you see around you start to happen?
Well, the war started on the 1st of September. They had reached our town, which wasn't all that far from the German border, within 5 days. And they created a ghetto in my town, Piotrków, 2 months after they invaded. So within 2 months, by the 1st of November, the war broke out on the 1st of September. And by the 1st of November, we were already incarcerated behind ghetto walls. We didn't have physical walls, but at first, but it was very, very carefully guarded, and life changed completely.
So did you move out of your home and into the ghetto?
Yeah.
And was that an overnight thing that happened? And, how did you feel? How did your family
Well,
feel?
they made that rule and we had to obey it, and
What
it
rule?
happened very
What was the
quickly.
rule that all Jews
The
had
rule
to...
was that all Jews move out of their homes and into the ghetto. And the ghetto, was in an area which was very dilapidated, the poor part of town. Every town has good places, good addresses and not such good addresses, but this was a very poor area of the town, and the people, the Christians moved out of there. Those that were there, there were already Jews living there anyway, and life changed completely, because once we're in the ghetto, they could do what they wanted to us. Yeah. We were sitting ducks, really. And they started arresting people and shooting people, and that was apart from the planned sort of things they had for us, which was deportations, and there was great overcrowding as well in the ghetto. Some rooms had like 10 people in them. And also because we were not all that far from the German border, and they annexed that part between the German border and sort of Piotrków, but not quite up to Piotrków. They annexed all along the border, and Jews had to move out of there. That became part of Germany. So then a lot of people made their way to our ghetto, and it became very overcrowded. Our population of 15 in the ghetto now had 28,000. 50,000 to 28,000. And because of the overcrowding, there were a lot of epidemics. Yes. People were dying.
And what was the size of the ghetto? Was, a couple of miles?
No, not as big as that. I really don't know
But it was small, like you could walk around.
It was much too small for the number of people it had. Yeah. Much too small. We could walk around, yes.
And were people assigned places to live? Or how did
No, we were free to find whatever we could find.
Wow.
So, some people fared better than others. And it was a sort of, a microcosm of real life, except for the cruelty that went with it. Because some people were better off than others. Yes. And some people could get perhaps better accommodation than others. Yes. But we had an administration, we had a president.
And would people work in the ghetto? Or...
Not many in the ghetto, no, because that was just like for residential. Yes. But they did work. They were sent to work in various factories. Okay. And some people did some work in the ghetto, but often it was like private for themselves. Maybe someone would make something, some skirt or blouse, and sell it and get a little money that way. And there was some food smuggled in.
And then once the ghetto was liquidated, what started to happen? What happened to you, your family? Was there a turning point where,
Well, there were rumors after about 2.5 years.
You were in the ghetto for 2.5 years?
Well, more than that, a little more than that, but wow. Till it was liquidated.
Yes.
But the rumors were that we were going to be deported, and we knew it was going to be to Treblinka, Majdanek, Sobibor. These were all death camps. Yeah. People were taken there within a few hours. They were gone. And people were in panic to try and save themselves. They couldn't all do it, but some people have various means. So one of them was to smuggle oneself out of the ghetto and live in the sewers or in the forest, anywhere out of sight or of the deportation. And some people had friends outside who would perhaps hide, one or two people. And some people were hiding Jews for money. And my father and my uncle, Joseph Klein, my cousin's father, my cousin Ija, they were introduced to a man from Częstochowa, town in Poland, about an hour away, or an hour and a half from Piotrków. And he was willing to hide two Jewish girls for the duration of the deportations. And he was doing it for money. And he wasn't only Polish, but he was part German, which meant they enjoyed better sort of conditions than the Poles. And he was willing to hide two girls, and he would be paid for it. And arrangements, he came into the ghetto, smuggled in, and to collect the money in advance and to talk about details. And he said that he'll come back. He took the money and he said he'll come back for he'd take one at a time. It was too dangerous to take more because the trains were sort of stopping and starting. It was very dangerous as well because they're on the lookout for Jews. Because there was a reward for handing in Jews into the Gestapo. So they were always, so if you travel on a train with other people, if they looked at you for a little longer than perhaps a few seconds, you said, well, they're suspecting you of being Jewish.
Yeah.
Although we both had blue eyes and fair hair, but it was very, very terrifying for us. So
I can imagine.
yeah, we ended up in Częstochowa, the two of us.
Okay.
And during the deportation, my brother had a work permit. He was working in a glass factory, glass works, they called it. And my father, mother, and sister, they were in hiding, living with a Polish family, but one was each family, there's three families hiding them. And so we all survived the deportations.
And then, so after the ghetto, you went to Ravensbrück?
When we returned, the people who were in hiding, like me, when I returned to the ghetto, my mother and sister, my father, brother, we were a complete family. But most families were completely dissipated or had disappeared, and there was maybe one or two left. Very unusual for a whole family to have survived that. But we were still together, but alas, not for long, because they knew that people were returning to the ghetto. For instance, I went in with my father's working party. And you think a little girl, nobody will notice. But in fact, they used to count and they used to look, but they weren't at that time because they knew people were coming back, and they just let them go in, and they had their agenda. When they thought everybody was back, then they started rounding them up. On one occasion, they stormed into a room where I was with my mother and sister, the three of us. We were all illegal. And they took everybody away. That was the police. And they put them into the synagogue, which had been bombed and was in a terrible state. But they took everybody except me. There were a lot of people there.
Yeah.
Because I was in bed, but only it was somewhere to be. The place was so crowded and there was a bed, and I got in. And my mother said, she's not well. And the policeman in charge said, that's all right, she can stay, which was most unusual. And he was one with not such a good reputation. You know, he took people very willingly.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said I could stay, and my mother said, stay here, don't go anywhere. And they took them to this synagogue under these terrible conditions. They stayed there, and every day they were adding more and more people. And then after a little while, I don't know the time scale, but they marched them out at dawn in groups of 50. And the first group, and they marched them to this forest called Rakov. The first group found their communal grave ready waiting for them, and the others followed. And I never repeat what happened, but we know exactly what happened because people witnessed it. But there are lots of books written about it. And it was happening all over Europe. It was the Einsatzgruppen or the 101 Battalion, and they were killing people in forests. And the largest one was in Kiev, in the Ukraine. There were over 3,000 people killed. And now there are memorials and things, but because I visited it, and apparently it got damaged in the bombing, something got damaged, some of the memorials. But it was a terrible time, the killings in the forests.
Did you know that was going on when you were still in the ghetto?
Well, I knew about my mother, yes, because I heard them talking, people around me talking, discussing, crying. But I didn't realize it was going on all over Europe.
And was your sister taken there as well?
Yes, they were taken together, yeah. We know exactly, and it's documented in many books, but I could never bring myself to describe what they did.
And what happened to you after then?
Well, after that, there were 3 of us left, my father and my brother and me. And during that very short time, they were still rounding people up, maybe for work. I don't know the details, but on one occasion, they rounded up my aunt on the Helfgott side, which is my father's side of the family. And by then, I was the only female member of the Helfgott family left. And it was down to me to take her child, 5-year-old Anne, and I looked after her. I was 12 and she was 5.
You looked after her in the ghetto?
Yeah, and she survived the war.
She survived. Did you stay together?
Yes, we stayed together. Oh, she was attached to me.
Yeah.
She was really so scared. She was always by my side, except when I started working as a slave laborer. When they liquidated the small ghetto, because there was this division between the big deportation, the small ghetto. After the big deportation, there was a small ghetto. Then they liquidated that, and people were sent to these 2 places, over 1,000 to each, the glass works and the plywood factory.
I see. What happened after the ghetto then? Where were you taken?
Well, we were working. We were allotted, my father and brother as well, and the 2 of us, Anne and me, to the plywood factory. It was called Bugaj. So we were on the Bugaj. They had prepared a sort of accommodation for the workers, the slave laborers. So the men were at one end of this, or the barracks for the men were at one end and the women at the other end. So I did see my father and brother occasionally, but I was working as well. And although Anne was so attached to me, she eventually, she couldn't, much as it hurt her, and no matter how much she objected, she couldn't come to work with me.
Yeah.
So, but because we worked shifts, there were always some women there to sort of keep an eye on her. Yeah.
And so after the ghetto, what happened when you were in the labor camps? Then what happened?
Well, we were in
there?
barracks.
Yeah, in the barracks.
And we had these soup kitchens, and we did some cooking as well. And well, we were surviving because we were really, in a way, still on home ground.
Yes.
So we could, and my father had connections outside.
Yes.
Because my father was, he had a mill in partnership with others. And so he used to buy, you know, the corn or whatever. And he knew a lot of people. So he was able to get some food into the ghetto, not just for us, but others as well. And that's how we lived there for 18 months. And after 18 months, they deported us, marched us to the station, the railway station.
Everyone.
The kettle trucks.
Everyone that was
everyone,
in the barracks.
All the Jews.
Yeah.
In fact, after we were deported, a notice went up at the railway station, Judenrein. That means free of Jews. There's no Jews here. They've taken them all. So we didn't know where we were going, but I now can tell you that the men were sent to Buchenwald concentration camp, and I was the woman went to Ravensbrück concentration camp. It was a very long, terrible journey, 4.5 days without food, water.
And you were all crammed together in
cattle trucks.
Cattle trucks.
Yeah.
And what was your first experience getting to Ravensbrück, the concentration camp?
Well, when we arrived there, the first thing they did is take everybody carried little bundles, their possessions, but they were all taken away. Then we queued up and had to give our details. And there is a list, that list exists online, and I've got a copy on my PowerPoint. So, you know, they were meticulous at record keeping, and a lot of the records survived. So they took details. Then we had to undress. They took our clothing away. Our heads were shaved. We went through cold communal showers. And when we got out at the other end, they gave us a concentration camp garb, this striped skirt and jacket. And when we looked at one another, we really could not recognize each other. It is such a shock to the system. We really couldn't recognize each other, and you know, it does something to you when you're stripped of your identity. And that really had a terrible effect on us. And it showed itself very quickly because my aunt, Franja Klein, died soon afterwards. My best friend, Pema Blachman, died soon after that. And people were just giving up. And these days, when I talk about anybody whose name I still remember or whose name I know at all, someone who's perished in the Holocaust, I always use their name, because who can imagine 6 million? And they were all individuals like us. They all had a life, and suddenly, I mean, I can't imagine 6 million. So that's my, decision to absolutely, if I know a name, I use it. Because there are a lot of names people are using, identifying with, but lots of them they haven't got records of.
It's just devastating and tragic.
Terrible.
And terrible. What were the conditions like there? And what did you do?
Well, they were terrible, but we didn't know what to expect. So whatever they were, we accepted. Well, we didn't have a choice. But what was to come, on looking back, then I can make the comparison that it was a very organized camp. First of all, we had to be out on parade, so to speak, every day at 6 o'clock. But somebody corrected me, said it was 5 o'clock. So we had to get up really early and fight for the bit of water to wash. And then we were standing on that, they call it something Platz in German. I actually forgotten the name. But it was a big, sort of, quite a big square outside the barracks, and they used to count us every day. But we used to stand there for so long, and we were there in February. It was freezing cold. I mean, really cold winters. I think they've got milder now. Yeah. And, you know, people used to die, and they used on this Platz, Appellplatz it was called. It was an Appell, it was the German name. And my aunt, one aunt worked, but the other aunt, I think, I don't think she even got as far as working. She went into hospital and she died. They had some sort of hospital. And, well, we weren't there all that long. I didn't work in Ravensbrück. And we were there about between nearly 3 months, maybe 2.5 months. And they decided to deport us again. And this time, after a shorter journey, we ended up in Bergen-Belsen.
What happened there?
Well, Bergen-Belsen, I assume that everybody in this country knows about it because it was liberated by the British Army. But people don't know, well, it's a very long time ago. Several generations have grown up since. Yeah. That is why, for those that still don't know, the young people will learn about it in school. But the earlier generations didn't learn about it at school. So you find that in a family you can have children who know more than the parents. Yes. So well, they're changing things, and I think it'd be very valuable for them to know. Yes. And to see what happens when a civilization breaks down.
Yeah, well, hopefully people will watch this and be able to hear, you know, it was in a lifetime. You know, this happened not that long ago.
No, but you know, I'm beginning to feel the length of time, because sometimes I'm struggling to remember certain details. Yeah. And my brother, he had a wonderful memory. Anything I wanted to know, I could ask him. But he's not so well now. And I don't think and he's got certain problems with vocal cords. Yeah. So my source of information is not there anymore.
So you went from Ravensbrück to Bergen-Belsen?
Yeah. So when we arrived there wasn't a station near Bergen-Belsen, a railway station. So and even the one where we stopped, there wasn't a station. And I remember that I still have it ringing in my head that we could hear the voices outside saying, "Raus, raus." and you know, the doors open, and the dogs were barking, and these soldiers were standing there feeding us up rouse, and we sort of formed into a column and walked to the camp. I don't know how far it is, but I can easily find out, but I haven't yet. And when we reached the camp, they had no room for us because that was near the end of the war. Not that I knew about it. Some people say they did know, but I certainly didn't know. And everything was so overcrowded because the end was nearing, and they were actually transporting people from the German camps in Poland into Germany because the Russians were arriving. They didn't want us to be liberated, of course. And in the end, they were just marching them from Poland to Germany, to the camps. They were called death marches. And of course, a lot of people, most people died on the death marches. But when we got there, it was very overcrowded. So they put us up in a big tent overnight, huge tent. And it was crowded with people. And there were people of from all different countries. So we could hear different languages being spoken. But in the morning, they let us into the camp. And, well, what I saw, the scene was that the first thing that hit you was the smog and the smell. And I could tell you why there was a smog, but there isn't time to tell everything. So we saw people, but there were skeletons. And they were shuffling along aimlessly. And then they would just shuffle and die, collapse and die. And there were dead bodies everywhere, and piles of bodies, piles of twisted, decaying corpses. It was just it was like walking into hell. One could imagine hell. I mean, none of us know what hell looks like, but we have the perception of what we think it looks like. In the children's home, I succumbed to typhus. And I remember lying on my bunk, on an upper bunk by the window, and I must have come back into consciousness. And I saw people running. I didn't know why or where they were running. What interested me was how have they got the strength to run? Because typhus is so debilitating. You just can't lift an arm, use your muscles. So that was the 15th of April, 1945, when we were liberated by the British Army.
And how did that feel for you? Obviously
well,
you had
I was
typhus.
really too ill to appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
And I just lay there. They emptied the barracks.
Could you hear the liberation? Like, as in, could you hear the army come in or?
No, I only remember these people running towards the gate, people and children.
And they were prisoners of the camp that were running towards the gate?
They were running because, you see, they were bringing people in. They were deporting people all the time and bringing them into the various camps. And, you know, there are always new people who are still not too bad, but once there, they deteriorated or caught typhus or all the other diseases. They were raging.
Yes.
There were still German soldiers around. And those German soldiers were still shooting people. It was liberation. And there's a whole story to how the camp was liberated. They knew that the British Army is sort of getting nearer, and and they didn't want them to take the camp by force, because they said that people will just escape and they'll spread typhus, and all villages, everybody all around, people will die. So the Germans went, three of them, three officers with a white flag, to meet the British. And they told them, look, we don't want a fight over the camp. So we'll just let you take it over, because we don't want any of these people to escape. And that's how it happened.
You went through the most dehumanizing experience to then have, you know, soldiers look at you as human beings and want to help you.
Yeah.
It must have, I can't even imagine what that feeling must have been like.
Oh, it's just so amazing. You can't even take it in at first. You sort of reflect on it, and then you really know what it's about, because at the time it was just too awful before, and sort of like coming from hell to heaven.
The story you tell is just extraordinary and you know, painful and unimaginable, I think, for somebody, you know, that's grown up in England. I've been fortunate, and I'm honoured to be able to have heard testimonials from Holocaust survivors throughout my upbringing, because of, you know, the Jewish school that I went to and being a part of the Jewish community, I guess. But why do you think it's important for stories like yours and other survivors' stories to continue to be told to, I guess, younger people?
Well, there's so many reasons, but if they learn about the Holocaust, first of all the ones that I have spoken to, I won't say all. I think some perhaps take them with a pinch of salt. I don't know. I don't speak to them all.
Yes.
But from the letters I have had, I've had some amazing letters from young people. And they sort of, just by hearing my story, they realized the importance of what prejudice does, how harmful it is, and that we should try and get rid of it. And we should learn to live together in harmony.
If only that was the case, the world would be a beautiful and peaceful place.
It would, wouldn't it? Yes.
So growing up in a Jewish community, I went to a Jewish school. We would, as you mentioned, you know, I'd go to synagogue on the main holidays, and we kind of practiced the religion, but, you know, nothing too intense or extreme. But I experienced anti-Semitism growing up. You know, I remember getting on a school bus and having other local kids throw stones at our bus.
Really?
Or whether it was, I was with people that would, you know, make jokes about Jewish people and the kind of perception that people assumed, or even, you know, jokes about the Holocaust, and which is disgraceful. Have you ever experienced any of that in your time after the Holocaust, of anti-Semitism, or the kind of anti-Semitism that you brush off because it might be a joke or something like that?
No, I haven't. It always comes to me secondhand. Someone tells me that they heard something, or someone said, or I read it in the paper. But I personally haven't really experienced much anti-Semitism. In a way, I hesitate to say it because I know it's around, and those are true stories that people tell. I remember being on, I was going to be on television to be questioned, to be interviewed. And I had to wait. And it's very funny because you wait and you see nothing. You just like in an empty room.
Yes.
And you wonder you can hear people talking, but I would have loved to have been able to see, but they were talking about an anti-Semitic incident which took place somewhere in North London. And it really, I boiled up about it. It's as if it happened to me. I felt it so deeply, and I felt so angry.
Yeah.
And so when my time came to be interviewed, the first thing I said, I was talking about this incident. And I've never seen that clip, and I don't know how it came over and what they cut out. But even though I don't experience much anti-Semitism, I could say none, the people I meet are not going to be anti-Semitic to me.
Yes.
And people in the street, they don't realize I'm Jewish.
Yes, but
So,
you've experienced the worst kind of anti-Semitism.
well,
you
indeed.
went through the Holocaust, so
Yeah.
you have had your fair share.
Absolutely.
That
I have never looked at it this way. It's very interesting. But what worse anti-Semitism can you have than the Holocaust?
There isn't. There really isn't.
But it's of day-to-day life in a normal society, in normal times. It sort of takes on a different shape somehow.
Yes. And that's what I think, sadly, as a younger generation, I've experienced. And I've experienced that anti-Semitism that's taken on a different shape, whether it's a passing comment or it's a perception that, all Jewish people fall under the same category and are the same type of people, or a throwaway comment. It's still anti-Semitism, and sadly...
It is still, and it's sort of hurtful, isn't it? People often ask me, well, why do you speak at schools? Well, you asked me that before, didn't you?
Yes.
I think, well, I'm not going to change the world, I don't suppose. But if I just succeed in making people understand what it's all about, anti-Semitism, prejudice, and discrimination, I feel that I would have perhaps helped society a little bit, or the future. It's not going to happen quickly.
No, but I think you have helped already massively, because, as you said, you've received letters and you've impacted people's lives and you've changed perceptions and you've broken down the wall of discrimination and that prejudice thought.
I would love people to read some of the letters I have received.
I think we can...
It is unbelievable. And I've got lots of them. Well, some are quite, or more ordinary, some are more deeper, some are... But some of them, and I want to quote, if I can still remember it, one very short thing. This was a very deeply thinking boy. He must have been about 18, maybe, still at schools, but perhaps the last year. And he said a lot of amazing things in the letter, but I just want to quote one of them. I don't know if I remember it exactly. But he said, this must never be forgotten, because if we forget, they will have won. And this is from a Christian boy, and he was so serious. He said he's disgusted with his friends. And this is the conclusion they came to. But he said a lot of other things. And I have had some amazing, amazing letters. I couldn't write letters like that with talented writers.
So, Marla, I want to say thank you so much. You're a true inspiration to me and a lot of other people. And I want to thank you for sharing your story and continuing to educate people on the Holocaust and also anti-Semitism, because it's amazing what you do and the way that you inspire people to, break down all the hate in the world. So thank you.